Welcome, everybody, to the Live Your Purpose podcast, episode 2. Welcome back to all those who listened to episode 1 as well, right? And obviously, if you haven't already done so, go back, check out episode 1, listen to kind of the heart behind this podcast, as well as maybe a little bit of an intro into what we're talking about here today. My name is Sarah Bettinger, hosting the show today alongside Monty Gannon, who we're kind of going into your story, Monty, and I know that you teased it on the last episode, the darkness of where your story kind of goes after, college and kind of just the party lifestyle in high school, as well as like 5 specific steps that people can take in terms of living purpose. So we've got a lot to unpack on today's episode, but as always, we want to encourage you, the listeners, every single day to live on purpose for a purpose. And so, Monty, let's just jump right in. Let's jump into your story. Unless you have anything else to kind of bring up before we go into it, I think let's pick up where we left off, talking about your journey into college and kind of where things maybe go dark in your story a little bit here.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And they should subscribe too, right?
They should subscribe.
Yes, you should, because then you won't miss updates or things like that, because the story is going to be a continuation. But yeah, I mean, we kind of left off, and I basically said that I was living my purpose during college, even after college, was, I think, maybe a lot of certainly single people, same purpose would be, have a good career, make good money. I guess in my case, it was chase a lot of girls and party a lot and drink a lot of alcohol, because that's what I did, and that was really my life. And at that season, I mean, what did they say? Sin is fun for a season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If it's not fun, you're not doing it right. That's what I've heard.
That's true. Yeah, I've heard a wise man say that. If it's not fun, you're not doing it right. And I did it right, and eventually things catch up, right? So I never dreamed that I would ever get into drugs. Like back to the small town thing, it just wasn't. We didn't have a clue. I think one time we thought we were smoking marijuana. We picked some stuff in a ditch.
Just smoking whatever.
We picked it in a ditch. So we picked this weed. I think it was milkweed. Honestly, I think it was milkweed. But I think it had herbicide on it. So you kind of got a little high. So we picked this ditchweed and we put it in a frying pan. Oh my gosh, why?
Is that like roasting nuts before you? Is that like the thought process behind that? Like, the similar type of thing. You're just kind of like extracting.
I don't know what it's like. I don't know. I think we were trying to burn the place down.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I've never seen so much smoke, and but again, you combine milkweed, herbicide, fire. We're just lucky the cops didn't come. That's all I could say. So, but I was never introduced to drugs in a small town, and even in college. I went to college at Northern State. Shout out to Northern State University, Aberdeen, South Dakota, Aberdoon. I mean, I love it, but dude, it's 10 degrees colder, than anywhere else. You might say than Canada, yes. Than Alaska, yes, sure, yes, it is. It's just, it was frigid, but I was never introduced to drugs there. It was after I came back to South Dakota, was living in Sioux Falls, and out just partying, and I got introduced to drugs, and I don't know, it spiraled quickly. How can I say this? Recreational use is how it started, and Friday night, then Friday, Saturday night, and pretty soon, a few months later, it was, let's, throw in a Wednesday, and let's throw in a Tuesday, and then it's like, let's throw in any day that ends with Y, so it, and these were hard drugs, so very addicting, and I'll never forget that feeling. I was living with a couple guys, roommates, and I'll never forget it. I was like, it was nighttime, and I had this feeling, a craving, and I'd never experienced a craving like that before. And it's then I just knew, it's like I'm in trouble. And you'd think that, that'd like make me pause and put on the brakes, but no, not me. It didn't stop me from continuing down that journey, and that is where it really turned dark. And I became a drug addict. And what's worse than that is a functioning drug addict who can wake up and work and still function and do what's necessary in life. And it just prolongs the pain. And that's what happened. And in that season, I mean, I met my beautiful wife, Jody. And she had no idea. And like, talk about living a double life. So she had no idea. We dated for 3 years. And during that time, the addiction kicked in during that time. It started recreationally when I met her and then turned into addiction during that season. We get married. And again, I'm just living this double life. And she didn't know because, again, I could function and I could hide it. And I did very well. So that's it was miserable. And of course, when you're living that kind of a life, and some of you, even as I talk about secrets and double life, man, maybe you're doing that. Maybe you can relate. I'm so grateful that you're listening. I'm so grateful that you're watching because, I believe that's on purpose. So, this is difficult. So, Jody and I are doing all kinds of things. Our marriage is falling apart. Of course, there's struggles, and we're trying counseling, and of course, the whole time I know what the problem is, but she doesn't, and the counselors don't. And you go to the counselors and you lie to them, and you talk to your friends and you lie to them. So, but eventually, what's amazing is I never got busted. I should have maybe 5,000 times, but never got busted. Never got really caught, I guess, but I was so miserable at the end. This is 3 years probably into the marriage now, using drugs daily, and it's out of control. And still have my job, still working my job, but somehow I'm just falling apart internally. And I remember driving in my car and I was so miserable, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I couldn't do it. I was driving and I realized in that moment, I'm like, I just need to tell my wife, Jody, what's going on. So that's what I did. I went home and I told Jody, that I was addicted to drugs, and God, boy, that was difficult because she was never, she hates drugs, and she was blindsided. Sarah, I think she said she maybe thought I was having an affair. She thought maybe I was embezzling money from who knows where. I mean, doing something that was amiss, but she just did not see drugs being at the end of this. And that was bad because it really crushed her and hurt her. And, we have a young daughter. We have Ava at the time who was, just a baby, and it was just so difficult. And so I go to rehab. That was my next step. I went to a place called Keystone in Canton, South Dakota, a great rehabilitation center, 30 days. But I'll be very transparent that I was not ready to stop, and I was going to save my marriage. I was going to save my family. But, and I know that sounds crazy, especially if you don't know addiction or you've never experienced it. It does. It's insane. It sounds insane because it is insane. So dumb. But so I go to this rehab, and I was at the point at that 30-day rehab where I wanted to stop. I didn't want to stop, but I wanted to stop. And that's a bad place to be. And sure enough, after 30 days, I get out, and shortly after that, I pick up where I left off, and fast forward another year later. It was actually Ava's second birthday. I was right back where I was, only worse. And I remember we had a birthday party at my house, or our house, and after we get done, my wife Jody said, you need to leave, you need to get out. And she never really said that before, so I knew that she was serious. I knew that this was different. And so what did I do? I went and got some drugs, what else would you do? And went to a seedy motel and basically just told God, here's, you know what? If I live through the night, I bargain with God. That's how smart I am.
We've all been there. Yeah.
You ever done that?
Oh, yeah.
Bargain with God?
Yeah.
God, if all these lights are green.
I'm not late for this. Yeah, absolutely. No, many times.
So I'm bargaining with God, and I say, God, if I live through the night, I'll go back to rehab. And if I don't, well, obviously I don't. So I, stayed up all night doing that, and saw the sun come up, and packed my bag and went back home and told my wife I'm going to rehab, and then I drove there, which probably I shouldn't have been driving a car. I'm just going to be honest, but I mean,
Jesus, take the wheel.
he needed to, and he did, and I haven't found that wheel since, actually. So yep, I went to another rehab center. Shout out to Tallgrass Rehab Center in T, South Dakota, and this one was a little bit more spiritually, I think, based, and 12-step based. Well, they were both 12-step based. They were both great for what I needed. I loved them both. I mean, they're both awesome. But this one was different. I wanted to stop. I was different, and I was different. And so after that journey, I get done with rehab. I'm going to 12-step recovery meetings. Shout out to AA and NA. I did those, and for a few years. And then Jody and I knew that eventually, or at this time, it was time to go back to church. It was time to put God at the center, because he just wasn't. And we just really felt compelled. Jody got invited by her hairdresser to go to a church in Sioux Falls. And we stumble into this church, and I'm still on shaky ground. I still wake up every day wanting to use and desperately trying not to. So and that's a hard place to be too. And so we stumbled into a church, and things really started to change.
Yeah, I think there's so much there that when you talk about, I mean, it's starting with kind of just acknowledging. I mean, I know you could go through, I'm sure, the whole 12-step process with people, but at the same time, it's like, I think a lot of times we just assume, okay, like I can figure this thing out on my own. Like I can stop, or I can get out of this, or I can shove this under the rug, or like I can put this in the past and not bring it up. Like why do you think it was so important to confess that, even though, like you said, that was maybe one of the worst parts of this whole situation?
That's a great question. So for me, I knew I couldn't stop. Like I knew, like, a lot of people, I've met guys and ladies that have stopped. They've stopped without rehab. They've stopped just cold turkey. It was different for me. I was beyond that in my journey. I knew that there was no way out. And you know how I knew that? Because one day, I've talked about this in church before, but I'll never forget it. I was in our closet, in a dark closet, and I'm holding drugs in my hand, and I fall to my knees, and I cry out to God. I'm like, God, I would do anything not to do these. I would do anything not to do these. And then I kind of get mad at God because I know I'm going to do them. And I said, but I don't. And then I told God, I said, God, but I don't have a choice, do I? Because addiction for me was slavery. I was a slave. Drugs were my master. That is a fact. And I thought that day in that closet, holding those drugs, here's the thought I had. This is how I'm going to die. And I believed it with all my heart. Like I believed there's no way out of this. Like even because I'd already been to rehab and it didn't work. And even though I wasn't ready for it to be done, I in that moment I thought, this is how it's going to end for me. Like my purpose is going to end in addiction and death with drugs. And that I believed it with all my heart. So maybe we talk about encouragement on this podcast. We talk about hope on this podcast all the time. I will shout out right now to anybody that is struggling in addiction. It might not be drugs. It might not be alcohol. It might be pornography. It might be food. It might be social media. It might be addicted to the wrong relationships. You could go on and on, but I'm here to tell you, if you've ever felt hopeless like I felt in a closet that day, if you've ever felt like there's no way out of this and this is how it's going to end for me, well, I'm here today and I'm telling you a different story, as you're going to hear. So know there's hope. Know that there is a way out when you don't think there's a way out. And for me, the way out was, now this is my story, the way out was God. And I told you before, I grew up with the foundation of God. I love my mom. She pointed me to Jesus at a young age, and I'm so grateful that she would drag 6 bratty kids all dressed in the same cowboy theme. I don't know why my mom would do that, but she would dress us the same. They would save the front pew for the Gannons that would walk into church 17 minutes late. And but you know what? My mom didn't care. She drove 15 miles from a farmhouse to get us to church, and she got us there. And you know, we might have been throwing Cheerios and beating each other over the head and you know, pulling hair, which we were doing all those things, but something was soaking in, because at the end of the day, I've always been a believer. I've never doubted Jesus. I've never doubted God. I've never doubted crucifixion, resurrection, never doubted any of those things. And that is because I had a mom and a family that pointed me to that at a young age. And I know that's why Jody and I knew that God was leading us back to his church. And you know, that's where we got hope again. AA did great things, and it got me where I needed to be for that season. But just like we had to talk about purpose as a journey, I was on a journey. We were on a journey. And stepping into church, being welcomed, knowing where I'd been, knowing what I'd done, knowing the people I'd hurt, being loved, you know, being valued, it changed us. And plus they had kids ministry. I'd never seen that before. So we could go in there and like give them our kids, and they would just like take them.
Kids just go in.
They just
we
go
can
in
do
their
whatever
thing.
we want.
It's like, I'm like,
Whatever
you'll
we
take our
want.
kids. I mean, we want them back. You know, maybe, you know, later tonight we'll go on a date after church and then come back and get them. But I never, you know, we didn't have that growing up in the church. So I thought that was the craziest thing, and that was really a treat. So
that is nice.
Yeah, it was.
That
nice.
is. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, like even if God is not in the equation for somebody listening, which I know that's part of both of our journeys, but even something that you just talked about through all those different stages, even leading up to the church, is like the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and those people not pursuing or not being in that. It's not like, well, I'm trying to get out of doing drugs and I'm going to parties every night, and you know, I can't figure out why I can't stop, you know, or I'm trying to stop watching pornography. I don't know why I just keep watching all these shows that have nude scenes in it and things like that. I can't figure it out. But it's like you're deliberately putting yourself in a different position with people who are pursuing the same thing that you said you wanted. Like, I want to get clean. I want to break this addiction. And so I'm going to rehab. I'm going to AA. I'm going to the church. And when you get around people who are pursuing purpose, or people who are pursuing freedom from addiction, or people who are pursuing, you know, X, Y, or Z, whatever it may be that you're dealing with, that's when I think that you can really start to grow in that. Because if you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail in a way.
You know, I didn't even think about it at the time. I know that now because they say you become who you hang out with, right? So when we went to church, but you're exactly right. When we were going to 12-step meetings, most of those people, not all, but most of them want to get clean and want to live a sober life, if you will. And that's good. I'm around those people. And then going to church. And as you know, not everybody in the church is following Jesus or seeking Jesus. But most are, and they're good people, and you surround yourself with those people. So you're spot on. I didn't know that I was doing that at the time. I wasn't like, I'm surrounding myself with great people because I'm going to go to church and I'm going to go to a 12-step meeting. But you're right. We were, and that it made all the difference in the world. So that's I'm so grateful that you brought that up.
So you go to the church that you were in, your wife was invited by the hairdresser. I know you've told that story before, which is a powerful story about just, hey, you never know when an invitation to something can make a difference, which I'm sure we'll do podcasts about that. But you get to the church, and what was it about? Obviously, you said you grew up in the church. So what was different this time around? Obviously, there's a lot of different things going on in your life, but I think sometimes, like, when we're feeling the most broken or the most vulnerable in a certain time in our life, like, you get into a place like that, and you acknowledge, like, we know we need God at the center. Was that the biggest difference there, or was it a mindset that you took in? What was it that made the difference this time?
when we walked into this church, it wasn't your traditional church. It wasn't a Catholic church. It wasn't a Lutheran church. It wasn't those traditional settings. It was a setting I'd never seen before. Like, we walked in and it was like, I mean, people are standing and there's a band up front playing, and I'm like, what? And people are raising their hands. I'm like, what? Do all these people have questions, or why is everybody raising their hand? No, they're worshiping, I guess, in that way. And I'd never seen such a environment where it's so celebratory and so joyous. And at first I thought, this don't even count as church. I mean, I don't see anybody like doing the sign of the cross.
Where's the altar boy?
Yeah. Where is the altar boy? Dang it. And he wasn't there, Sarah.
No,
he wasn't there. So
Nope.
it was different. It was like almost like a party. But it wasn't just a party. I mean, there was this biblical message coming at me that I was like, I kind of get what he's saying. And I'm like, a lot of times I didn't, as a kid in church, you don't understand a lot, but I was finally at this stage where I'm like, I understood the message, and I could not tell you today that first message. I don't know what it was about. I know it was a message in the Bible, but I don't remember the main point. I don't remember what they said, but I remember how I felt. And isn't that the truth for a lot of people? I hear that a lot. People don't know what you said or remember that, but they remember how you made them feel. And I can attest to that. That's what it was for Jody and I. As we went there, we felt, I mean, now I would tell you it was the presence of the Holy Spirit. But at that time, I was like, it just feels good. It just feels like people care. It just feels genuine. I understand what's happening or what he's saying, this pastor. And, and again, they're watching our kids. I mean, it was free daycare, Sarah. I mean, so there's all these perks and pluses, and they just made us feel at home. And that was one of their mantras, welcome home, which we always say at our church today. So it was that, and all the people that made up the church. And, I know a lot of people have been hurt by the church. A lot of people have been hurt by religion. And in fact, I just shared it on a message Sunday that it wasn't, if you've ever been hurt by the church or ever been hurt by a Christian, if you will, I'm sorry that happened. It happens way too often, but just know that wasn't Jesus. Okay, that was people. That wasn't that, and that's what I would tell you. But don't give up. Listen to this. Don't give up on the local church, because the church saved me. Now I get it. I know Jesus saves, but Jesus used his church, because when Jody and I stepped into that church that day in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that's the turning point. That's when things started to change. That's when the addiction started to subside. The craving started to subside. That's when, instead of living for me or just living for our family, we started to actually live for other people. And it wasn't so much about us, but it was about this person that I don't know. And soon I found myself, the kids ministry I love so much to check my kids into, soon I'm serving in the kids ministry, in the church, 3rd through 5th grade, I'll never forget. And I remember, because I called him one day and I said, I feel like I'm supposed to do something. And now I know it was the Holy Spirit. But then I just thought, it's probably another harebrained scheme. Who knows what I'm doing. So I called the church and I met with a pastor, and I'm like, I just feel like I'm supposed to do something more. Am I supposed to move to Africa and sell all my stuff? I hope not, but if that's what God wants me to do, you never know what God does. And he said, do you serve? And I was like, I don't even really. I was an altar boy, as we know, but what
I have served.
Yes.
Yeah, in the past.
So he said, we serve here. We, a lot of times we attend a service and then we serve another service. In other words, we pour into ourselves and then we pour out to others. And I was like, wow, that seems like an awesome concept. I love that. And things started to change. I started serving in the kids ministry at this church where Jody and I were being transformed. And lo and behold, we're serving and 3 years go by. And I don't think I missed a Sunday. I attended a service. I think I served the first service at 9. I attended the 11, and I did that for 3 years. And it was. I didn't feel like it all the time. There was weekends I didn't feel like doing it, but there was such joy in seeing these kids, these pre-teenagers getting excited about God, getting excited about the Bible. I was like blown away that they were asking questions, and I was just so intrigued by it. Little did I know, that's when God was really starting to develop me as a leader, and guide me towards more purpose and guide me on my journey. So you don't see it when you're in it a lot of times, your purpose, your journey. It's when you look back down the hill or down the mountain. But that's where things started to change. I started serving in the kids ministry there, served there for 3 years. And and here's what I thought my purpose was at that time. If you would have asked me, Monty, what's your purpose right now? I think I would have had a clear answer. My purpose is to be a part of the church. It's to continually grow in my faith with my family, and then serve in the church, give my life away for these elementary kids and teach them, what the Word of God says and who Jesus is, and then be a witness in the world. I believe it or not, I still had my job. Shout out to my boss, my late boss, which is hard to say because, he passed away this past year from cancer, and he made a big impact on my life when it comes to leadership. So, but he kept me on. He believed in me through 2 rehabs, just insane. And he just taught me a lot about grace, forgiveness, and leadership. So it was amazing. So what was I talking about?
You were talking about how you served for 3 years and you felt like you could clearly define your purpose at that point.
Thank you, Sarah, for helping me. Don't do drugs, Sarah. Okay, it'll rot your brain.
We were talking about that before. Caffeine, that doesn't count apparently. So I
don't know. Does caffeine count as a drug?
That's too. I mean,
let us know what you think in the comments. We don't know. So, but yeah. So if you would have asked me my purpose, I would have said I'm doing my calling in the church, and outside the church, I'm working at the job. I'm witnessing to people at work. I'm inviting them to church. I'm telling them about Jesus. I didn't care. I was pretty bold in my faith at that time. Jesus had changed me. I was putting up scriptures. So yeah, I think people thought I was part of a cult, but anyway,
right.
So.
Well, I think a lot of times too, is it as simple as just like, okay, my purpose is right now to be open-minded to whatever I feel like, if the Holy Spirit is in the equation, whatever the Holy Spirit is prompting me to do, as well as just kind of being where I'm at, like being where your feet are at. Is that the essence of purpose, or is it deeper than that to you? Because I think like we want to narrow it down to specific seasons of life, right? Like, well, right now I'm serving in the kids ministry, and I'm doing well in this area. My job is going well, so obviously, like, those are the things that I need to really just like lean into. But then there's this aspect of like, what we think is our purpose in the now, and then what God has planned, because obviously things really shifted for you and for us as you went from serving in the kids ministry to then being the campus pastor at one of our church locations. So is it as simple as just like an open-mindedness and being where your feet are at, just listening, or is it something different than that?
I think it's both. And I think some people get so caught up in the future and their purpose that, someday I'm gonna be there. Someday I'll do that, and you miss it in the moment, because we have already said it's a journey, and your purpose, make no mistake, it starts today, and your purpose is doing they always say do the next right thing. Here's your purpose right now: do the next right thing where you're at right today with who you're around. That's purpose. Right? That's purpose. So it happens now, and we all know the next right thing, even though we maybe don't always do it. So don't keep waiting before you step into love somebody, to serve somebody like I started to do in the kids ministry, to reach out to somebody, to forgive somebody, to tell somebody that you love them, or that you care for them, or that you were thinking about them today. How many times do we think these thoughts that are good thoughts? And somebody told me once, a mentor told me once, he said, if there's a good thought that comes to your mind about somebody, never keep it to yourself. Share it with them. Text them, call them, message them, send a carrier pigeon to them. Whatever you had to, You ever?
That's how I text people, is like my thoughts. Like,
Yeah.
I thought that I said yes, so therefore I did.
That's how we communicate with our wives too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly.
But if you think something good about somebody, say it, share it. And I forgot. So I forgot one thing about, because we promised them last episode I was going to share something. So I want to share something with you before we close this episode, and it's this. Purpose really got real for me when I was in rehab the first time. I told you that I wanted to stop, but that 30-day rehab at Keystone in Canton, South Dakota was not wasted, because God was doing things. We went to a church in Canton one Sunday, and they had the books called A Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. And I bought a book, and when you're in rehab, kind of like jail, you got some time on your hands. And I was not a reader. I was convinced after college I will never read again, Sarah.
No need.
Never say never.
Never. No.
Is that a 007? Never say never?
Never say. Yeah.
Never
I think
say
so. Never say die.
Never say die.
Yeah.
Well,
I've never even seen it, but
I'd like to
that.
make another movie called Never Say Never.
Yeah, I like it.
And then you're going to play 007.
Justin Bieber would appreciate, I think. Never say never. I will never say never.
Yes. Okay, you got to keep me on track.
Yeah, so live your purpose.
Yeah. So I get this book, and lo and behold, I find myself reading again, and this book, A Purpose-Driven Life, I'm telling you, for me, it changed my life, because that's when it hit me. And I read this book, and it's laid out, read a chapter a day, and I was reading a chapter a day. And as I'm reading this book, and it's from the lens of believers, it's from the lens of God and Christians. So which I was a believer at that time. It just wasn't, I believed in Jesus, just wasn't following him, which, boy, that's a whole nother podcast. But Rick Warren in this book, from a believer point of view, this is from a God-centered point of view now. So he laid out our purposes when it comes to universal purposes, a purpose that everybody has together. If you're a follower of Jesus now, so if you're a follower of Jesus, I'm going to give you some gold here. Your purpose is laid out in the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. So the Great Commandment, if you don't know it, I'll tell you, because I love you, and it's about love. Love God and love others. That's the Great Commandment. So your first two purposes, universal purposes, if you're a follower of Jesus, is to love him first and foremost and love others. See, you're getting cues to your purpose right now. What's the second half? You got the Great Commandment and you got the Great Commission. The Great Commission is what Jesus said towards the very tail end of his life before he ascended up into heaven after rising from the dead. And this is the other 3 points of your purpose. You got love God, love others. Now you got the Great Commission. Go and make disciples. In other words, go and spread your faith, share your faith, tell others about Jesus. That's a purpose of yours. Go and make disciples, baptize them in my name. We just celebrated baptisms at church, saw 19 people get baptized. So go and make disciples, baptize them, and then teach them to obey. So there it is. Your 5 universal purposes. This is for the audience that is what you would say you're a Christian. That this is for you. So love God, love others, go evangelize, spread the word of God, baptize others. In other words, disciple others. And literally, you should, once you're saved and baptized, you should baptize others and then teach them. Again, back to discipleship. Disciple them, teach them the word, help them learn what you've learned. That is the 5 universal purposes. That's the Cliff Notes of A Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. But that book, I don't know why, it just radically... It just spoke to me, and it made me fall in love with reading again. I mean, now I'm an avid reader, which you would have asked me that a while back. No, but I am now, and so there's some purposes that if you're a follower of Jesus, we just laid them out for you. Those are universal for anybody. You also have unique ones, but that's not for today. But that was the game changer. So we can leave it there, and next episode, it's going to get even more vulnerable and more real. And it's to give you a little preview, I'll tell you this, that God's many times that your plans and God's plans look different. In fact, I would say most of the time they look different. And what you think your purpose is and what your direction is, God has maybe a different direction for you. And I found that out in multiple different ways, and much of which was surprising, painful. But I'll leave you with this for anybody going through a season of being blindsided, anybody going through a season of pain. There's purpose in your pain. I'll tell you that much right now. I'm going to leave it at that, but I want you to come back for episode 3 because I'm going to unpack things that I never dreamed I would ever face in my life, and what that's looking like for me right now.
We're going to unpack that in the next episode. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening today. If you haven't already, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check it out on YouTube as well. Comment for the algorithm. Let us know your thoughts on today's episode. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.